I spent 38 years underneath diesel locomotives at the rail yard in Altoona, Pennsylvania. My back is crooked from heavy wrenches. My fingernails have grease lines that 40 years of lava soap could never scrub away. My wife Martha used to say my hands felt like dry oak bark. But those hands paid off a 2-story brick home on Maple Street. And those hands built the small machine shop in my backyard, where I spent my retirement fixing farm equipment for the locals. My name is Arthur Pendelton. I am 68 years old. 2 months ago, I was laying in a hospital bed in Pittsburgh after a mild stroke. I couldn't speak clearly, my right side was weak, and the room was always too bright. My second son, David, came into the room holding a clipboard and a blue ballpoint pen. David wears a silver ring on his thumb and works for a real estate firm in Philadelphia. "Dad, the hospital needs your signature for the insurance authorization," David said. His voice was quiet, too quiet. He held the papers so I could only see the bottom line. I trusted my boy. I took the pen with my shaking left hand, and I signed my name. 2 weeks later, I came home in a wheelchair. The lock on my backyard machine shop door had been replaced with a heavy brass padlock. My grandson Noah was standing by the porch holding his school bag. Noah is 15 years old. "Grandpa?" Noah whispered, looking down at his sneakers. "Dad sold your lathe and your welding rigs to a scrap buyer last Tuesday. He told the real estate company you were moving into a care facility." I sat in that wheelchair in the middle of my own gravel driveway. The cold autumn wind was rustling the dry oak leaves across the yard. I pulled off my wool cap, feeling the chill on my scalp. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I reached into my coat pocket and felt the small steel brass gauge I've carried since 1984. "A man who steals from his bedridden father forgets one thing," I said softly to the wind. "He forgets that the man who built the house knows where every loose floorboard is hidden." I didn't let David put me in a care facility. I refused the transport van when it showed up at the driveway on Monday morning. I packed one leather suitcase with 3 flannel shirts, my work trousers, and my medical records. I rented a small 1-room basement apartment 3 blocks down Maple Street, right behind the old freight depot. It cost $400 a month. It smelled like damp concrete, old coal dust, and wet wool. My right leg was still weak, dragging slightly on the pavement when I walked. Every step felt like pulling 100 pounds of wet gravel through the mud. My right thumb was partially numb, making it hard to button my own shirt in the cold mornings. I lived on my small monthly railroad pension check, $1,800. I bought canned soup, cheap oats, and black tea at the corner market. I boiled my water on a single electric hot plate sitting on an old wooden crate. I spent my evenings sitting under a bare light bulb, writing in a small black spiral notebook using my left hand. David thought he had cleared the board. He had used that signed paper, which was actually a durable power of attorney, to transfer the deed of my house and machine shop into his corporate LLC. He listed my home on the market for $320,000. He bought himself a brand-new German sedan with black leather seats, parking it right in front of the house I spent 38 years paying off. Every morning at 7 o'clock, I walked past my old house on my way to the depot. I saw my old oak workbench sitting out by the alley curb, split in half and waiting for the garbage truck. I saw the blue real estate sign stuck deep into my front lawn. My heart burned in my chest like hot coal. In the dark of that basement apartment, my mind tried to drag me down. I thought about Martha. I thought about how hard we worked to paint those porch rails every spring. I thought about calling David and asking him why my 38 years of sweat weren't worth anything to him. I reached into my pocket and held that steel brass gauge. Asking a thief to return what he stole only teaches him that you're weak. "I am Arthur Pendelton," I whispered to the concrete walls. "I built those locomotives, and nobody scraps me until I say so." David made one mistake. He was a salesman, not a mechanic. He knew how to talk to buyers, but he didn't know how property law worked in Blair County. Before I went into the hospital, I hadn't kept my original house deed in a bank vault. I had built a double-walled steel tool chest in 1992. Inside the hollow bottom frame of that chest, wrapped in oiled canvas, was the original 1986 hand-written land covenant signed by the town magistrate. That covenant stated clearly that the backyard plot, where the machine shop stood, was deeded separately as an industrial easement that could never be transferred without a notarized physical survey from the county engineer. David had sold the tools, but he hadn't moved the heavy steel tool chest. It was too heavy. It weighed 400 pounds, bolted straight through the concrete floor. On a rainy Thursday night, Noah met me behind the high school football field. He was wearing his rain jacket, holding a small flashlight. "Grandpa," Noah said, his voice shaking in the dark, "Dad is signing the final closing papers with the buyer tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock. He told Mom we're moving to a gated community near Philadelphia next month." I looked at my grandson. "Noah," I said quietly, "do you still have the spare key to the side cellar door of the shop?" Noah reached into his pocket and handed me a small brass key. "I hid it under the rain gutter like you showed me 5 years ago." I took the key, feeling the cold brass against my palm. "You're a good boy, Noah," I told him. "You remember how to read a micrometer?" "Yes, Grandpa," he said. "Then you know that a fraction of an inch is the difference between a machine that runs and a machine that wrecks itself." At 1 o'clock the next afternoon, David sat in the glass conference room of the Blair County Title Company. He was wearing his tailored suit, smiling, shaking hands with the real estate agent and the buyer, a wealthy developer from Pittsburgh. The settlement papers were spread out across the long mahogany table. The buyer held a certified bank check for $320,000. David picked up his pen, ready to sign the final deed transfer. The heavy oak door of the conference room opened. I walked in. My right foot dragged slightly on the carpet, making a slow, rhythmic sliding sound. I was wearing my clean flannel shirt, my dark work trousers, and my steel-toed boots. Noah walked right behind me, carrying a heavy, flat canvas bag. David stopped his pen mid-air. His face went pale, his eyes darting from me to the real estate agent. "Dad?" David, his voice dropping an octave. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be resting." I didn't answer him. I walked straight to the head of the table, pulling out a heavy wooden chair, and sat down. I set my hands flat on the mahogany wood, my rough, grease-stained fingers standing out against the polished finish. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice steady, deep, and clear, "the seller does not hold clear title to Parcel 4B of Maple Street." The buyer looked up, frowning. "What is he talking about?" David stood up fast, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "He's confused," David, his voice rising in panic. "He had a stroke 2 months ago. He has mild dementia." "I have his signed power of attorney right here." I reached into Noah's canvas bag and pulled out 3 folded sheets of yellowed parchment. I laid them softly on top of the settlement papers. "That power of attorney was signed while I was under heavy sedation in Pittsburgh," I said, looking the buyer in the eyes. "And even if it were valid, it applies only to residential property." Parcel 4B, the machine shop, is an active industrial easement under the 1986 Altoona Rail Ordinance. It cannot be sold, transferred, or converted into residential land without an open public hearing. The title agent picked up the yellowed parchment, adjusting his glasses. He read the red county seal at the bottom. He looked at David. Then he looked at the parchment. "Where did you get this?" the agent asked. "I built the chest it was hidden in," I said. The buyer slowly pulled his certified check back off the table and slid it into his coat pocket. He looked at David with cold disgust. "You told me this property had a clean title," the buyer said. "I'm not putting a nickel into a lawsuit with the county." The buyer stood up, buttoned his jacket, and walked out of the room, closing the door behind him. The real estate agent gathered his files, shook his head at David, and walked out right behind him. The conference room went dead silent. David stood there beside his empty chair, his hands shaking, his expensive suit looking suddenly rumpled and cheap. He looked at me, the old man in the flannel shirt who was supposed to be fading away in a yellow room. "Dad," David rasped, his eyes wet with desperate anger. "The LLC took out a $60,000 bridge loan against that sale. The bank is going to freeze my accounts by Monday." I stood up from the chair, my right leg holding my weight solid and firm. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the small brass gauge, and set it on the mahogany table beside his pen. "Choices have tolerances, David," I said softly, my voice calm and even. "If you force a steel fitting into a space that's 3/1000ths too small, it binds up. And when it snaps, you don't blame the metal. You blame the man who didn't know how to measure." David looked down at the small brass gauge on the table. He didn't speak. He couldn't. He realized right then that the $60,000 he owed the bank was his load to haul, and nobody was going to carry it for him. I turned around, walked out of the conference room, and stepped out onto the sidewalk into the crisp Pennsylvania sunshine. Noah walked beside me, his hands jammed into his jacket pockets. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, Noah and I were standing in the backyard on Maple Street. The blue real estate sign was lying flat on the grass behind the shed. I unlocked the heavy padlock on the machine shop door using the brass key Noah had kept under the gutter. The shop was empty. The tools were gone, and the concrete floor was dusty. But the heavy steel chest was still there, bolted solid to the floorboards. Noah pulled 2 bottles of ice-cold root beer out of his backpack and handed one to me. We sat together on the wooden steps of the shop, drinking our soda, watching the afternoon sun filter through the oak trees. "Are you going to buy new tools, Grandpa?" Noah asked. "One wrench at a time, son," I said. "An old shop doesn't die because the tools are gone. It dies when the man inside gives up." Noah smiled, leaning his head against the wooden doorframe. "I'll help you rebuild the lathe," Noah said. "I know you will, son," I told him. I am 68 years old. My right leg drags a little when I walk, and my fingernails will always have grease lines under the skin. I don't have a new German car, and I don't have a house in a gated community. But when I wake up tomorrow morning, I'll walk up those wooden steps into my own shop. I won't owe a single dollar to any bank, and I won't owe an explanation to any man. My name is Arthur Pendelton, and my shop is open for business.